Good morning. It's another perfect day in Owl's Head, Maine. It's 65 degrees. This is in between rainstorms, so if I look soggy, it's because of it. And at the same time I'm out, I invited my bride, Holly, and my sister-in-law, Karen Smith, an internist, to join me in a walk and talk, but they decided they didn't want to do that. So we got a group picture together with our two pups that were out for a walk, Ajax and Kara. So I'm on my own. The the stories are persistent, repetitive, with inflection and change, and they invite all manner of upsettedness among intelligent people, concerned citizens, parents, community members, and every other category you can think of. And what we're dealing with is, how do we handle these different issues? And in my conversations as I travel around, it's very interesting to me how people glom onto expressions that are unreliable, that suit the biases they have. And we all have seen this and observed this. Now, there's a good friend of mine, Charlie Kaiser, who is very sensitive to this information and a very reliable reporter, having been with the Times and the Wall Street Journal and so forth. And he has been educating the community about the mandate for leadership, which is the proposal from the conservative side for what it's going to be like in 2025 if they have their way. And as for freedom, in any sense that you or I may understand it, we're kissing that goodbye. It may not be that we would be sitting on cots in some camp somewhere because we disagree ever so slightly with the administration. But it sure sounds like that kind of government that rents out entire sports arenas to contain the people that are dissidents to what is claimed to be freedom, which is nothing of the sort. And while I can't understand it for people who claim to be charitable, it is understandable if you think of, master race kinds of things and so forth, how they would define the family and what they consider acceptable. And so, for some reason, they are so fixated on what is permissible sex and permissible parenting and whether or not a woman should have control of her body. And in all these respects, they would limit and restrict the freedom that most of us have come to know over the last 50 years, either by experiencing it or by living some large proportion or fraction of that period of time. It was a period of time in which the choice of a woman, what to do with her body, was a paramount legal concern. But you see, it informed other aspects of how we define freedom. And starting with Griswold against Connecticut, Justice Douglas wrote of what he called the penumbra, that kind of light around the moon, that second illumination. And he was talking about the amendments to the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, due process, Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. And the best summation or definition of what those amendments mean is the right to be let alone. Don't bother with me. Don't mess with me. Now, when someone else disagrees with your exercise of freedom, say to have an abortion, say to have a dissonant affectional preference from the mandate for leadership. That is to say, same-sex marriages and the variety of ways one now celebrates gender. And they make these things the earmark of enemies of the people rather than freedom. And they talk about eliminating the civil service. And I think if you were to try to sum it up, it would be to take every progressive idea going back to the 1920s and eliminating that from then to now, and any possible difference or adjustment to that. And we often hear this is the most important election of our lives. Well, it is. And here's the kicker about that. People talk about Biden, they're tired of him, they don't like him, and so on and so forth. His mission, for my political purposes, was to present a picture of America that was solid, responsible, could find a way to deal with the extremes in our society, find a way to have us talk to each other rather than shout at each other, rather than talk about violence toward each other. Basically to replace Trump in person and in policy and inflection, every way possible. Now, am I happy with all of Fighting Joe's positions? No, I'm not. But Holly and I even occasionally disagree on things. So that's not so unusual. But what is unusual in American history is a government that would compromise the freedoms that have existed as part of the original promise that we would be all equal and that we would have equal justice under the law. And even now, as we are finding our way back to these notions, we're getting enormous resistance. And it's like there's an amnesia in the public of what it took to get to where we are, or have been as recently as 2016, before the Trumpian far-right extreme revolution, if you will. And it was a revolution in waiting from their standpoint, because the vote was going away from them. The vote that supported a difference among the races, among the sexes, that did not honor an individual's right to do things that not everybody else wanted to do. And that's what an individual right is. It's an assertion against the government's intrusion on that right to be alone, going back to the language of Griswold against Connecticut. So when we talk about, limiting abortion or denying it, which is, in fact, there will be no abortions according to the mandate for leadership, you realize that ignorance is leading the way in compromising a democratic/Republican form of government, Republican small r, meaning representative government, for an autocracy, a dictatorship that intends to take over in some melange of overheated religiosity imposed on others who don't follow that religion, or any religion in some cases, and turning America really into a backwater in terms of the freedoms that we claim lead the world. So this is a critical document. It tells us what we already know, but then they write it down. And I have, in my own experience, compared it to Churchill reading Mein Kampf when others didn't, trying to tell his community, his party, the people, that read his book, he's telling us what he's going to do. Do not appease this bastard. And now we're in that situation in our own nation-state inflection, and we're seeing made manifest. They're not even going to wait. They're going to tell us. They didn't publish it. It was found out. Their mandate for leadership is a compromise of all the things that people normally think of. And can you be so angry with our diversity and our efforts at unity that you would tear down the house? Well, 30% of Republicans apparently believe that, and they are, in a sense, the true enemy of the people. And they seek to compromise the gains that have been made so that America is a garden of freedom. And we're all practical and realistic and somewhat cynical, so we know what this means. Now, among the indications that we get it are things like the sealed discussion about how to handle Trump's extrajudicial statements, meaning his threats, his efforts to affect the jury pool, to discourage individual witnesses, and that we know that we have data points that this has been done in his case in the past. And so we have to deal with that. And I'm hoping that Judge Chutkan, who's responsible for the D.C. case, will find a path to deter the kind of large, broad jury tampering that Trump has been following, and so have his people. And their notion is all we have to do is get one in the jury, to hang the jury and to save Trump. And then we have to elect him so he can pardon himself and pardon others. And we have to be aware of this and deal with it in real time. So since these proceedings about the extrajudicial statements of Trump are not public, we don't know what that debate is like, but I'm encouraged that it exists. It's only been in the papers the last couple of days. And finally, in the category of, so in the meantime, what do we do about Biden if we disagree? We should disagree. That is to say, in an open democracy in which a leader mostly represents our views, if those among us have criticisms, we should make them. One obvious one is what Biden has done in Alaska. If I misspoke a moment ago and I said Trump when I meant Biden, forgive me. But what I'm saying is that if Biden is taking positions that we disagree with, silence is not our answer. That's not democracy. So we have in Alaska Biden allowing for 10 million acres to be, exploited, and shutting down others that might become open. And that's a start. But the 10 million should not have occurred in the first place. And we have to say this as concerned about environmentalism, even as we go through seasons of global warming aftershocks. And if we're not dealing with that global warming, including how we handle fossil fuels and human participation in the creation of the fossil fuels that make these unfortunate, untoward, painful, and compromising aspects of global warming to the detriment of property, health, persons, and life, then we're failing our obligation as citizens and as leaders in our own country and in the world. So, those are a couple of things that are on my mind as I stroll pleasantly through the parks near Owl's Head, Maine. And I hope you enjoyed it, and it's nice to be visiting with you even while we're on vacation. And where I am, there are some trees, so I say goodbye to you from my Best Pocket Park of trees, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow if I can. Bye-bye.